So that song is really powerful because it's actually one of the reasons why I'm talking about letting go as we swing through life. So I've always been the queen of letting go. My husband once got me a T-shirt and it said, "I finally got a grip when I learned to let go." And I always say that on my epitaph, it's going to say, "She finally let go." And with all that letting go, you would think it would be easy, but it's not. And that song brought up a lot. So a couple years ago, my husband of many years passed away, and I had a church in California, and I loved the church. And it was someone in my congregation, I was turning 80, and someone in my congregation said to me, she says, "Oh, when I turned 80, I jumped out of a plane." And I said, "Well, I'm jumping out of my life," and which is what I did. So I left the ministry, I left my home, I packed up my car, and I drove across the country and had no idea what I was going to do. I figured I had family on the East Coast, so at least I would be near family. And I said to her, "You jumped out of a plane, I'm jumping out of my life." And, saying goodbye is really hard. But what I knew is that I had to say goodbye to that in order to be whatever was next for me to be. And even though I didn't know what it was, I knew that somehow it was going to be okay. Because what I've learned about letting go is that it always turns out okay. But the thing is that we hold on. We hold on to stuff because it's familiar. We like things that are familiar. I guarantee you that almost everybody here has got a drawer in their house where they are holding on to all kinds of things. Things that sometimes may be like a rubber band that doesn't even cost that much. In the fear that I'm going to need a rubber band, I'm not going to have a rubber band. Like, you can't go to a store and get a rubber band. And the other thing is that I've learned that if I don't hold on to stuff, when something comes up and I need it, I remember something that my husband always taught me, and that was everything we need is within 5 feet of us. Now, I have to tell you, this has happened over and over and over again. You need something and you don't have it, and you look around, and if you stop and meditate on the idea that everything I need is within 5 feet, you will find something that works. It may not be a rubber band, it may be a string, but you can get the string to do what the rubber band did. And so we hold on to stuff because of fear. We're afraid that if somehow we let this go, we won't be able to replace it. If we let go of a relationship, we won't be able to replace it. If we let go of an addiction, who will we be? If we let go of a job, who will we be? Retirement is very hard for people because it's like, if you let go of what you do, who are you? Because most of us in our life, we identify ourselves by what we do. And so we have trouble letting go because we think that's it. And the thing that's interesting is that even if what we're holding on to is terrible, we still hold on to it. I have to tell you, women stay in abuse and men stay in abusive relationships because they're afraid of letting go, even though what they've got isn't good. So one of my favorite stories about that is actually from the Old Testament. So I grew up Jewish. I didn't like the whole thing about religion. I just never made any sense to me. God never made any sense to me. I was always questioning it. So I never went to synagogue, temple, or anything else. So the only thing I knew about Judaism was the Passover Seder, because we always had a Seder. And the Passover Seder is about the Israelites and when they leave Egypt. So what happens is the Israelites are slaves. Now they're slaves, folks. They don't have anything to say about their life. They have a roof over their head. They have a job. They don't get paid for the job, but they have a job. And they're okay. They're okay with their misery. And then one day, Moses comes to them because he had this word from God, and he says, "We're going to leave. And we're going to the promised land." And they're thinking, I don't want to go to the promised land. Where is the promised land? What's going to be in the promised land? I have a house here. I have a job. I have friends. Why would I want to go there? And they don't want to go. And the Pharaoh doesn't want them to go. So God intercedes and throws plagues on them, and they have no choice but they have to leave. Now, I grew up Jewish, and I have to tell you that as a whole, we like to complain. Jewish people like to complain. And so they're leaving Egypt. Now, Egypt metaphysically represents the material world. And so they have to leave the materiality of their world and go into an unknown. And they are not happy about it. How many times have you got to leave something and you were not happy about it? And what do? You murmur, 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 complain, 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 complain. The whole way they're complaining. So they're complaining and they leave Egypt and they get to the Red Sea. And all of a sudden, Pharaoh is coming after them. And they start really complaining, even louder. You got us to this place. We're at the Red Sea. The Pharaoh is after us. He's going to kill us all. We can't get through the Red Sea. And Moses is like, stop complaining. God's got this. And they don't believe him. So the story is that God divides the Red Sea and they go through it. Well, a couple of years ago, there was a movie called Of God and Kings. It was a remake of this story. And in this movie, what's interesting is when Moses walks into the Red Sea and the people have to follow him, the Red Sea has not divided. They start walking into the water. They actually get to about waist deep before the waters start to part. And when you think about it, that's what happens in our life. Very often we have to take a step and we cannot see what it is. The sea isn't parting, but we know because God has led us to believe that this is where we're supposed to go, that we walk into the water, parted or not. And so it was so interesting with this movie. So in the story, the Red Sea parts, the Israelites go through, the Pharaoh follows, the Red Sea drowns everybody. Now you would think that they would get the message. But the Israelites also metaphysically represent us as basically teenage spiritual people, not adults. And so they get into the desert, and what do? Have you ever had a teenager? What do? They complain and complain and complain. It doesn't matter what you do for them. They're going to figure out a way to complain. And they're in the desert and they're moaning and groaning and complaining and all of that, and they don't have food. They don't have water. So what does God do? He provides them manna, which is food from heaven. Are they happy with that? No. Why? Because God gives them enough food for the day. They need food for tomorrow, right? We get things for today. We're grateful for today, but we're complaining because maybe tomorrow we won't have it. And, but God gives them enough for today. So they are getting ready to go into the promised land. And what's interesting is they don't get to go into the promised land until every single person, with the exception of 2 people, die that came out of Egypt, including Moses. And what that means metaphysically is we don't get to step into our next phase until all of our old thinking disappears. Unity was known as a new thought movement. New thought. We have to change the way we think in order to change our life. We don't get to go into a new life with our old thinking. We have to change that. Jesus said when the rich rich young man comes up to Jesus and goes, I want to follow you. And Jesus says, okay, give up all your wealth and you can come follow me. And the young guy goes, you want me to give up my money? I don't want to give up my money. My money is who I am. And Jesus says, bye. Well, it wasn't that Jesus didn't want him to have money. I'm sure Jesus wanted him to have money because he had a lot of expenses and he didn't work. So I'm sure he was very happy that this rich guy, but what it was is that he was attached to that. And what Jesus was saying is you can't have 2 gods. You can't have me and money. So you have to be able to give that up. So we learn that we have to let go of things that hold us back. And a lot of those things is old thinking. And the reason we're afraid is that we don't believe, even though we may say it and affirm it, at some point in our core of being, we are not sure God is going to be there. We affirm it, but we're not sure God's going to be there. So I had something that happened to me many years ago, which at the time I didn't realize was actually all about this. But my kids were little. They're now in their 50s. But they were little, and they were 10, 12, two boys. I don't know if you have boys, but boys at that age love to make fun of their mothers. At least mine did. So we go to Disney World. We lived in Miami. We go to Disney World, and I didn't have money for a second day in Disney World, so I decided to take them to Circus World. Circus World was put up by Ring Barnum and Bailey, and it was this place, and they had animals, and they had a big top. And what they did is they had a circus, and they would pick people from the audience to participate in the circus acts. So they had high wire, and they had the animal trainer, and they had people acting as clowns and everything, and they brought people from the audience. So the last act in a circus is usually their trapeze act. And I don't know if I'm a big movie buff, so in all the movies about circuses, the trapeze act always has three people. They have an older guy, a younger guy, and a beautiful woman. So in the movie Big Top, the older guy was played by Burt Lancaster, the younger guy by Tony Curtis, and the woman was played by Gina Lollobrigida. So I'm going to call them Tony, Burt, and Gina. So the ringmaster says, do we have a volunteer? Now I am 5 feet tall on my best day, and I do not like heights. And my children know I do not like heights. They decide to volunteer me. So they start going, pick her, pick her, pick her. And the ringmaster thinks this is really funny, that these boys are volunteering their mother. So guess who they pick? Me. Now, I could have said no, but I never, ever would have heard the end of it if I had said no. So I get up and I walk to the bottom of the stairs, and I am thinking, how am I going to kill these children and get away with it? Because they are not making it home. If I make it out of here alive, they're not making it home. So I get to the bottom of the stairs, and Bert is there. And Bert says to me, take off your shoes. He says, you're going to climb up the ladder. You're going to get up there. Gina's up there. Gina's going to tell you what to do. Tony is on the other platform, and Gina will explain everything. I'm thinking, maybe to you he's going to explain, but not to me. But before I know it again, because I don't know what else to do, and I have to tell you, it was before the time in my life when I was clean and sober. So that may explain why I climbed up the stairs, because I don't quite remember that. But I know I went up the stairs, and I got to the platform, and Gina says to me, this is what's going to happen. I'm thinking, I can tell you what's going to happen. It's not what you think is going to happen. And they said, Tony is going to come out from his platform, and you're going to go out from this platform, and you're going to swing out, and Tony's going to swing out, and Tony's going to scream, let go. And you're going to let go, and he's going to catch you. I'm thinking, not on your life. So I think I'm just not going to grab the trapeze. If I don't grab the trapeze, I'm not going to be going out over there. And the next thing I know, she takes my hand, she puts it on the trapeze, she pushes me out. Now, I'm going out there. Tony comes from the other one, and Tony screams to me, let go. I scream, hell no. He goes back, I go back. He comes out again, I come out again. He screams, let go. My words get a little more colorful. 3, 4 times this happens. He's screaming, let go, and I'm screaming profanities, which are getting deeper and deeper. And I'm also thinking I had contact lenses. They're going to probably fall out of my head. They're going to wind up on someone's forehead. I don't know what's going to happen. Everybody is laughing. My children are laughing so loud, they're on the ground. They can barely sit. They're laughing so loud. This is going on. And, everyone thinks this is funny. Finally, Tony gives up. He gives up. He goes back to his platform. He thinks this lady is crazy. I'm going to be up here all day. I'm going back to my platform. Now, I am on a trapeze by myself over the big top. Now, there was a net, but I thought, I'm going to fall in this net. I'm going to bounce out of the net because they always seem to bounce out, right? I'm going to hit my head. I'm going to have a concussion. It's going to serve my children right. They're going to have to figure out how they're getting home on their own. So I'm up there and I'm hanging, and eventually the trapeze stops moving. And I am just hanging there. Have you ever seen the picture of the cat hanging onto a trapeze and it's something about letting? That was me. I was like holding on for dear life. And then what happened is my hands started to hurt. And then my arms started to hurt. And then my shoulders started to hurt. And I was in so much pain that eventually I was in so much pain, physical pain, I had no choice but decide I was probably going to die that day and let go of the trapeze. And what was interesting, what happened was very interesting, and I didn't realize this until many years later. When I fell into the net, instead of bouncing out and landing on my head and having a concussion or dead or whatever, I landed in the net, and the net came up and engulfed me. And that, folks, is God. This is what happens when we let go. When we truly let go, whatever we fall into, we are not falling into it alone. God's grace is always there, engulfing us, keeping us safe, letting us know that whatever is going on, it's going to be okay. Will it be the way we want it? Maybe not. Will the results be what we think we should have for ourselves? Maybe not. But the fact of the matter is that God's grace is always greater than anything we can figure out for ourselves. I always like to say that God's will doesn't take me where God's grace doesn't keep me. And so I think now always of letting go as allowing God's grace to fill me. So I can get in the car and drive across the country. Did anything happen in the last year I thought was going to happen? No. And so, you do this gratitude thing and everyone says what they're grateful for. We're grateful for everything. My favorite gratitude is I am grateful for everything I have and everything I don't have. I am grateful for everything I am and everything I'm not. I am grateful for everything that is and everything that is not. Because God works in our lives in ways that we don't always see. It isn't sometimes what we get, it's what we don't get. It isn't so much like what we achieve as sometimes the lessons we learn by what we don't achieve. And I remember that. Whenever I have to let go, I remember that net. And I sometimes just close my eyes and I just picture this net of God's grace just coming around me and keeping me safe. So I invite you to close your eyes for a moment and think about maybe something that you're thinking about letting go of, or you think you should let go of, you don't want to let go of, or some fear you may have about something. Teresa talked about fear last week, about some fear that something may not be the way you think it should be. And just take a deep breath and just feel the grace and love of God surrounding you, enfolding you, keeping you safe. Knowing that that grace is always with us. We may not see it. We may not feel it at the moment. But we know it to be true. And we know that God's will not take us, or God's grace will not keep us. And so we can release and we can let go, knowing we live and breathe and have our being in the very presence and grace of God. And for that, we are truly grateful. And so it is.